Clearly we need so much more than what in Swedish is called den nationella insatsstyrkan. But still, we need also that. And so much more in terms of different tools. So here we are together in a podcast with Lars Nylén, Michael Salen and myself, Lars Nylén, in order to explore a wide spectrum of issues relating to crime, organized crime, terrorism, migration, cybersecurity and what have you. We have packed this podcast rather tightly, using also AI voices summarizing 2 reports from Lars Nylén on this very important topic. I hope you enjoy and benefit from this podcast, which is as part of a series covering all kinds of security threats and opportunities for Sweden in the current very complicated situation worldwide. Who could be better placed to discuss social unrest in Sweden, the rise of cyber threats, terrorism, organized crime and so on, links to migration, than Lars Nylén, one of the key fathers of the elite police national task force, which he started to work on to organize in Stockholm as regional police commander very early, and continued into his role as head of the criminal police in Sweden for many years. So welcome, Lars. I'm here with Michael Salen, former State Secretary for Defense in Sweden, to discuss with you the challenges facing Sweden, Europe and the world at the current time. One key aspect of your experience, Lars, is of course your international network, having been trained in the FBI, having worked with Germany in developing this elite police task force, having worked with Norway, etc., etc. And that is so important when we discuss the integration of Sweden into the EU and now NATO, also in this key area of linking up internal and external security.
Thank you to having me, Lars-Erik and Michael. It's a great honor to be on your podcast. It's very obvious that we in Europe and also in Sweden are facing 2 threats to security and freedom. One is war, the other is crime. And more from the European Union perspective, we see how unfriendly and malicious states infiltrates and manipulates member states and even Sweden. They do that using covert methods and also in open actions. And we normally call that hybrid actions, hybrid threats. Or we can also call it a shadow war, with many times insidious and subversive methods that we not even are aware of, and we're not aware of what is happening and who is pulling the strings. But the war is ongoing. This hybrid war is ongoing. And its intentions is to destabilize, weaken and divide the European Union and its member states. So we have to cope with that and develop our methods to deal with it. And first of all, it's important to be aware of the situation, but also building security and safety around what's important in Europe and in Sweden.
So let me now switch over to a small slideshow. We're using AI voices and try to get an overview of a report that you produced for our interim report, a second interim report from the SVAR project. These almost 50 pages of intense, a lot of facts, but at the same time an overview of the links between different areas here that is crucial to understand. So before we start, let me hear also from Michael if he wants to add a few additional initial comments.
Because you did say that the European countries, Sweden included, are faced by two main threats. One is war, and the other one is crime. And of course, the main theme here is the connection between those two. There is a third category one might suggest. So let me ask you what you think about that, which is terrorism. Is terrorism crime or war, so to speak? Let me start there to you, Lars.
Terrorism is a crime, but since 9/11, with that great scale of terrorism, it has been a change through the United Nations resolutions. You can also use military means to handle that situation. So that is a new perspective on terrorism. But normally, when we are talking about terrorism, it is a crime. And then we, of course, have the situation in today's Gaza, which started as a terrorism situation, and it's a full war going on there. So there are two different situations to be handled. That is the main topic of my paper, which says that external and internal threat and response is merging, but in a very blurred perspective. It's a shadow war going on.
Okay, let's go.
You know, we used to think about national security in, well, pretty straightforward terms, didn't we? Armies, borders, maybe some classic spy stuff.
Yeah, boots on the ground, that kind of thing.
Exactly. But the threats that seem to be swirling around now, they feel so much more complex, harder to grasp.
That's kind of what we're digging into today.
That's right. We're taking a close look at Sweden specifically and the really intricate security challenges it's up against. The main focus is on something called hybrid threats.
Okay, hybrid threats. Sounds a bit sci-fi or like something from a spy novel. What does that actually mean? What are we talking about here?
Well, fundamentally, it's about blurring those traditional lines, between internal problems and external attacks.
Yeah.
It's not just one enemy or one method. It's more of a mix. Things like cyber attacks aimed at critical infrastructure, maybe, or deliberately spreading disinformation to cause chaos.
Okay.
And even using migration flows, sort of weaponizing them. Our source material today really emphasizes that these tactics they're becoming much more common. So it's not just about new tech, like digital warfare. There's a history to this kind of thinking, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. The report we're looking at traces it back. Think Sun Tzu exploiting weaknesses instead of direct confrontation.
Right, asymmetric warfare.
Exactly. Or Clausewitz, war as politics by other means. The big difference now, of course, is the toolbox. Social media spreads narratives instantly. And you've got proxy actors, could be criminal gangs, could be bot networks, anything really.
So the core idea is hitting the weak spots, the seams in a society.
Precisely, hitting the digital weak spots, social divisions, migration pressures, all to achieve goals without, a traditional fight. That's the modern twist.
And the real kicker with these hybrid threats, as the report points out, seems to be this built-in deniability.
That's the core problem. It's often incredibly hard to prove who's actually responsible, who's pulling the strings.
Right.
And that lack of clear attribution, it makes responding effectively so difficult. It breeds uncertainty, erodes trust. It's not just about dodging blame. The ambiguity itself is part of the weapon.
Okay, so for this deep dive, we've got this security analysis focused squarely on Sweden. What's our main aim here? What should you listening in hope to get out of this?
Well, our mission really is to unpack how all these different risks facing Sweden connect. How does a cyber weakness link to organized crime, for instance?
Or how disinformation fuels existing tensions?
Exactly. And crucially, what strategies are being developed, or at least looked at, to counter these really multifaceted challenges?
Right.
Most recent report, you focus more squarely and directly on the hybrid aspect of the various challenges that we have. In the former report, you are going through gang violence, clandestine clan activities in suburbs, etc., terrorism, more as such. So I think my question to you now would be, to what extent has it become clear to you that the most relevant aspect of all these activities that seem to be threats to the societal stability in a country like ours is really its hybrid nature, crime as a proxy to malicious activities from state actors mainly, such that you have a tendency for securitization of combating crime. Is that a fair description, that in your thinking you're focusing more and more to in that end, or are we talking about simultaneous activities, both crime for reasons of crime and crime as proxy of state actors?
The first paper, the longer one, has a broader perspective, but it also shows the interaction between crime and state actors, how the state actors are using criminals, especially criminals in transnational organized crime networks, for their actions as proxies. And they are then using different tools. The criminals are using different tools, but so are the state actors. So we get a broad perspective of activities to which we have to build safety and security and protection. So the second paper is digging into one part of it all, but at the same time, as I said, it's a mixture and it's a blurred picture. It's very, very difficult to see what is behind all these activities. So what could be an accident, it could be an ordinary crime, but could also be a proxy crime instigated by a foreign state, an enemy state or an hostile state. So that is the new situation, and the new situation has risen due to globalization and the digital revolution, which has made it more easy to commit this type of threats and also crimes all around the world. You can sit wherever you want on the globe and commit crimes in other countries, and also commit cyber threats and hybrid threats. So that's the new situation, which makes this very difficult to handle, and you can't handle it only by law enforcement measures. You need to use a lot of different tools at the same time to enforce the law when it comes to crime, and to confront the state behind the cyber threats.
Looking at the short period I was in Brussels in the terrorist working group just before 9/11, at that point people were making a very clear distinction between state-sponsored activities, terrorist activities, and organized crime. But very soon after 9/11, both sides came into an integrated way of working, first in the G8, but also in the European Union. We still had on the EU level, major treaty problems. We didn't yet have the Lisbon Treaty, but soon after some time, the need to build up a coherent approach to this became more evident.
You can have a legal perspective on this, how to write laws and so on. And we need to do that, of course, because we are working in a society rule of law. When the alarm clocks are ringing, you can't say what is the background. Why does this happen? Is it an accident? Is it a terrorist attack? And who is behind the terrorist attack? Or is it another type of crime? So take, for example, the last situation in Vancouver in Canada, where a person in a car drove straight into a crowd of people and killed several and injured even more. Was it a terrorist attack? Were there any other state behind it? Or was it just an accident? And apparently the police in Canada says that was an accident by a person who were well known to the police since earlier.
The report names a few key groups. First, state-sponsored actors. China and Russia get specific mentions engaging in espionage, maybe laying groundwork for future disruption.
Okay.
Then you have cyber criminals, mostly after money, right? Ransomware is a big one there.
Yeah.
And finally, hacktivists driven more by ideology or politics.
And it feels like this isn't just skilled individuals anymore. The whole cyber threat scene seems more industrialized, more accessible.
That's a good way to put it. We're seeing this rise of crime as a service, like a dark web supermarket almost.
Rent a hacker.
Pretty much. Rent ransomware tools, hire botnets, buy stolen data. It lowers the bar for entry. And maybe even more worrying, the report flags the growing threat of AI-powered attacks.
How so?
Think AI that can learn network weaknesses, adapt attacks on the fly, maybe even automate the whole process. Much, much harder to detect than the old methods.
That sounds incredibly destabilizing. What's the real-world risk here? Why should we be concerned?
The potential impact is huge, especially for critical infrastructure. Imagine hospitals locked out of patient data.
A power grid going down.
Exactly. These aren't just hypotheticals, they're real vulnerabilities. And it's not just the initial hit, it's the potential domino effect across systems that could lead to, widespread societal disruption.
A new arena for the police to work in, but I think we are just in the beginning of taking responsibility for that area. It's very difficult because it's all business driven.
Yeah, and a lot of expertise is in the business and the consulting firms and so on. So getting this public-private partnership here seems to be essential.
Basically, engineering or exploiting people's movement for political gain.
Right.
The situation with Belarus in 2021 is cited migrants allegedly pushed towards the EU border.
I remember that.
And more recently, the issues on the Russia-Finland border in 2023. These are seen as examples of this tactic in action.
And the EU's been trying to respond to this, right? There was that pact recently.
Yes, the EU Pact 2024. It aims to tighten border security, speed up returns for those without asylum rights. But the report suggests there are still loopholes, practical hurdles. It doesn't fully stop states from orchestrating these movements, perhaps. It manages the fallout more.
Does it address the root cause, the state orchestration?
That's the question, isn't it? It seems more focused on managing the symptoms. The report also brings up a darker connection here between irregular migration and crime. Well, the smuggling networks that move people, they often overlap with other criminal stuff like drug trafficking. It creates this really tangled web of threats that's hard to deal with.
Okay.
What's important to be vigilant on is the changes due to the new administration in the United States and the Mexican border. I think, and that's my experience, that migration changes according to state response. And there have been many migrants from other parts of the world than America, South America and Mexico especially. And if they are stopped, they will seek other routes to get to a better life. And because of that, and also because of the tense situation, the war in the Middle East and other countries, there is a risk, according to my opinion, that we will see a new wave of migrants coming towards the European Union border. And we need to be aware of that and take actions accordingly.
Michael?
Well, lots to say on this. On migration, of course, we have, according to UNHCR, some latest figure I saw was 120 or so million refugees waiting to come to either to Europe or to North America. So it's an enormous problem potentially in this, of course, and the EU has been struggling, as we've seen, to find unanimous moves in order to prevent this from again exploding.
I can say that we are facing a very, very blurred and mixed situation. And talking about migration, war has always been a problem. War and crisis are a problem. But we also have to face in the future the climate changes, which are also giving us migration problems. And there has always been a connection between migration and criminal activities, also criminal activities driven by states to interfere with other states. So there must be a response according to that, with different tools, different levels, different authorities taking responsibility in cooperation.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on.
Unrest. The report points out how the digital world just pours gasoline on these fires. It uses the UK riots in 2024 as an example. What happened there and why is it relevant?
Right. The trigger was apparently a stabbing in Southport. But what makes it a hybrid threat case study is how far-right groups reportedly jumped onto social media.
Spreading misinformation.
Exactly. Spreading disinformation, inciting more trouble. There was even talk of foreign bots getting involved, amplifying it all.
Wow.
And the impact was huge. 27 cities affected, lots of arrests. It even led to that public spat between the UK Prime Minister and Elon Musk over content on X.
Right, about moderation.
The key takeaway seemed to be how fast online incitement can spiral into real-world chaos and the need for a quick response.
And closer to home for Sweden, those Quran burnings earlier this year, they had pretty serious consequences too.
They really did. Reportedly caused delays in Sweden joining NATO, and then there were alleged cyber attacks from Iran in retaliation. The Swedish government launched an inquiry, which ended up recommending tougher laws on public gatherings. And globally, there was a big backlash, boycotts, embassy attacks.
It really highlights the power of platforms like TikTok or X. They're not just sharing stuff. They can amplify really inflammatory content and have actual geopolitical effects. It's like they're players in this game, maybe unintentionally.
That's a critical point. These platforms are powerful tools for communication, sure, but they can absolutely be exploited to spread division and escalate tensions incredibly fast.
Social media is a very good tool when you want to instigate other people. It could be a good tool when you want people in a serious way to gather, but it can also be a very, very effective tool in instigating and mobilizing the mob, the thugs, to come and take over a normally positive or non-violent situation. And that was what they were thinking about in the UK riots last year, and we have seen it in other situations too. So nothing new, but with a new tool they have through social media. The danger is that it will spread like a wildfire.
The numbers are pretty stark.
They really are. The estimate is over 8,000 active members, maybe 30,000 affiliates, and over 700 enablers people helping them out as of 2024.
And what are they doing?
A whole range of damaging stuff. Large-scale welfare fraud, drug trafficking, and something particularly worrying, recruiting kids, minors.
And these aren't just local street gangs, right? The report mentions bigger connections.
No, definitely not just local. It stresses significant transnational links. Connections to powerful Middle Eastern clans, even links to the Russian mafia.
Which must make them harder to tackle.
Much harder. It gives them resources, reach across borders. It complicates law enforcement efforts massively.
You mentioned recruiting young people. The report cites a huge jump in minors involved in serious crime. 93 suspected in murder plots in just 6 months of 2024 versus 26 in all of 2023. That's terrifying.
It's a shocking statistic, and the tactics used are pretty awful. Grooming kids on social media, trapping them with debts, even threatening families to keep them in line.
And what's the effect on the ground in these areas? The report mentions parallel justice systems emerging. What does that actually mean?
It means in some marginalized communities, these gangs gain so much power, they basically set their own rules. They enforce their own kind of justice.
So people lose faith in the police, the courts.
Exactly. Trust in state institutions just collapses. The rule of law breaks down. It's like the social contract itself is fraying in those places.
What we see is a growing network of organized crime, also transnational organized crime. And that is because several criminals in Sweden with links in other roots in other countries, they are going abroad, they are staying abroad, and they are leading and instigating crime in Sweden and in other countries in Europe and elsewhere. And so that makes it, they use borders to protect themselves because they know that law enforcement has problems to be quick enough to handle the situation. It takes court decisions to do investigations in other countries if you are allowed to do that. Sometimes not. And because of that, they hide and they get security also in other states, which then again use them as proxies. They provide them with a safe haven if they commit different hybrid actions in countries in Europe, for example. So it's going back and forth, up and down. So it's like a merry-go-round, and for law enforcement, which is a national issue, it's hard to be there on that merry-go-round. It's like trying to catch the train running behind it. We need more and more international cooperation between law enforcement agencies and, of course, courts also. But that's a problem.
I mean, if we talk about Middle East roots of some gang violence in Sweden, for example, and then add the analysis of proxies being used by the government of Iran, for example, So you have and I raise this as a question to you, Lars. Isn't it an interesting aspect of all this, that by way of action and reaction we have this blur between east, west, and north, south dimensions to it? We are coming to terrorism soon, but as long as we talk about other forms of violence, you have this multi-dimensionality, don't we?
Yeah, of course, because when we're talking about transnational organized, severe organized crime, it's a global issue, because the traditional organized crime is about drug dealing, and we have the cocaine problem from South America. We have Asia, we have Northern Africa, and because of that, they are cooperating, and they have their routes for transferring drugs also to Europe and Sweden, and they try to avoid detection, of course, and because of that, they come through the back doors, which we are not guarding as well as the main door, so to say, and that makes it a global thing. When we talk about different routes from Asia to Europe, it has changed due to the war in Ukraine. It changes due to the war and the situation, the tense situation in Middle East, and it will change with the closed border U.S. And Mexico. So, but and of course, some states they use this for their purposes, and criminals which normally are out there to earn money, they don't want to get caught, but they need to and want they want to earn money, so they choose the best way, and that could be on a global trip before they reach the destination country.
Yeah, it's a fascinating map, actually. When UNODC, the UN Office for Drugs and Crime and Terrorism in Vienna, looked at this over the last 25 years, increasingly the route through Africa and the Middle East came up as a way to come into Europe, as you say. And that changed, of course, the entire way in which one had to address, and it just underscored the importance of the link between east, west, north, south that Michael just mentioned.
Because of uh, the new administration in U.S. and the tariffs, if you follow the news, you understand that shipping has changed. A lot of ships going from Asia to the United States, due to the new tariffs, they are rerouted and they are coming to Europe. And what will be the trade routes on the oceans in the future? Where do the flow of cargo and the ships sailing in the future, will that mean a new threat to us in Europe, because of all the containers coming into Europe and then spreading around in the member states?
Yeah.
We also have to be aware of what's going up north, because we have seen crimes transferred in a very, very northern perspective, up north in Scandinavia, and further on to destination countries. So they are using the whole globe to commit their criminality, actually.
Yeah. Now this links up to the one of our overall challenges in the project, namely to address the issue of flow security. We have a lot of essential flows. We need supplies, There are good flows, but there are involved or even integrated into the good flows in many cases very much problematic flows as well. Let's go on.
How does that threat fit into this already messy picture?
Well, the Swedish legal definition focuses on the intent, right? The intent to destabilize society, undermine the basics.
Okay.
Right now, the main concern seems to be lone actors, people radicalized online, maybe inspired by groups like ISIS. We've seen similar plots elsewhere, like in Austria.
There's another angle, too.
Yes, a really significant worry raised in the report is the potential for state-sponsored attacks carried out using these criminal networks.
Using the gangs as proxies.
Potentially. Russia is mentioned as a possible actor here. The power and reach of these crime groups make you wonder how vulnerable we are to them being co-opted for, well, other kinds of attacks.
This clash of legal systems, the report talks about the state versus these informal clan systems. What are the practical effects of that?
It creates a huge vulnerability. When clan justice, which might involve things like honor killings or settling disputes outside the law, takes over from the state's laws, it just eats away at the state's authority.
Undermines trust.
Completely. And that lack of trust creates the perfect environment for gangs to thrive. The 2024 National Security Strategy actually makes dismantling these parallel societies a top priority.
Which brings us to that core idea, the state monopoly on force. The report suggests this is weakening in some areas. Why does that matter so much?
It's fundamental. The traditional idea, the Westphalian model, is that only the state has the legitimate right to use force within its borders.
Right.
But globalization, powerful non-state actors like these crime networks,
Right.
they're challenging that. You see clan loyalties sometimes overriding civic duty. People might refuse to cooperate with police.
So if that monopoly erodes, what happens?
It raises serious questions about long-term stability, doesn't it?
Yeah.
How does society function if the state isn't seen as the ultimate authority?
And the suggested response is more assertive policing.
That seems to be the direction indicated, yeah. A need to actively reassert the state's authority, rebuild trust by showing effective action against crime in those affected areas.
Earlier, we saw a lot of hijacking and that kind of terrorism cases. And now we see how they used to radicalize single persons individually to commit serious crimes, and they really can do that, causing a lot of trouble in society, causing a lot of death and injured people, like in using a car in a public area with a lot of people. And behind that development, we can see terrorist actors like ISIS, for example, instigating these persons to do this. If you can't come down here to us and fight with us, use whatever tool you have, a knife, a stone, a car, and commit as much trouble to the society where you're living as possible, because then you're helping us. That was the mantra they were presenting on the net, and which helped to radicalization of a lot of people, also in Sweden, to commit this type of crimes and terrorist crimes. So that's one important thing. The other issue which was raised here is how the ordinary criminal justice system is challenged by other types of judicial systems coming in from countries which are new countries or countries that has a cracked governmental situation where people are used to take care of their own security and judicial issues, using what was called the traditional laws. And when they are living in a new country with this judicial system we call the Westphalian system, they still uses their old system to solve problem. We have seen that many times in Sweden and also in other countries, of course, and it also have been objections in ordinary criminal courts in Sweden and in other countries in Europe where the suspect says the court can't handle this because we have already done that in our traditional system. So,
Thank you. So let's move on to the national security
What are its
strategy.
main goals?
It seems to have two main prongs. First, really go after the links between organized crime and terrorism.
Okay.
Second, actively push back against foreign interference in Swedish society. And alongside that, there's a big emphasis on boosting cyber resilience and protecting critical infrastructure.
Does the report see any potential gaps or weaknesses in this strategy?
It does suggest one potential blind spot, maybe underestimating just how fast youth radicalization is happening online and the urgent need for really specific programs to tackle that particular challenge.
Stepping back a bit, what about the EU level? What role are EU-wide counterterrorism efforts playing here?
Well, there are initiatives like expanding Frontex, the border agency, and Europol's MPACT operations, which target specific crime threats across Europe.
Are they working?
The report mentions some successes, like 28 thwarted terror attacks across the EU in 2022, but it also flags worrying trends, rising far-right online activity, and a persistent problem: gaps in sharing intelligence effectively between member states.
So thwarting attacks is good, but maybe it doesn't show the whole picture if other threats are growing and cooperation isn't perfect.
That seems to be the implication, yes.
It feels like just building stronger walls isn't the whole answer. The report talks about building societal resilience. What does that look like in practice?
It's about multiple things working together. Counter-radicalization programs in schools, trying to intervene early.
Makes sense.
Strengthening community policing, building better links and intel sharing with local leaders, and also using technology like AI for threat detection, maybe proactive cyber patrolling.
And internationally, collaboration must be key.
Absolutely essential. Sweden joining NATO obviously opens doors for better intel sharing on these hybrid threats within that alliance. There's also alignment with the UN's Agenda 2030, specifically Goal 16 on the rule of law. But the report is realistic too. It notes challenges, like different EU countries having different priorities. Poland's focus on its eastern border is given as an example. National concerns can vary.
Looking forward then, what does the crystal ball show? What future threats does the report highlight?
A few big concerns. AI-driven disinformation getting even more sophisticated and widespread. That's a major risk for manipulating opinion and causing chaos.
That sounds scary.
Are we ready for that?
That's a huge question. Our current tools might struggle. Another potential issue is surges in climate-driven migration being exploited. And there are internal weaknesses too: overloaded prisons, understaffed security agencies. Those need fixing. On the plus side, the report does see opportunities in using EU-wide crisis response mechanisms better.
Maybe you want to make, Lars, a final pitch for what we need to focus on in terms of threats and what we need to focus on in terms of policy.
We need to take away all the obstacles we have to become as efficient as possible. And of course, there are different areas where it's important to work. Harmonizing laws, dealing with the encryption systems, which make communication between criminals secret things. So we need to cooperate between countries, between authorities, and I also think it's very important to be on the beat, but also be cyberspace.
Thank you for listening in on this podcast from the SVAR project of the Royal Swedish Academy of War Sciences with Lars Nylén, Michael Salen, and myself, Lars Erik Lundin. Please stay tuned for the next podcast.